Kandi Spangler. Almost everybody in here knows her, but my first experience with Kandi, I think, was somewhere up outside of Boulder County with Greg Cox and Crazy George Furco.
Imagine that.
That was a sketchy crew right
That
there.
was a sketchy
That's a
day.
sketch.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hang out with,
And at that time, I think we
pretty
were both pretty similarly apprehensive about the whole ADV thing, but we were interested in learning and getting better. And I probably hate to admit it, but I think Kandi's probably surpassed me in that regard. And certainly she's made a name and a reputation for herself and has gone on some great adventures far and wide. And that's what she's here to share with us tonight, is about her recent adventure to Patagonia. Sounds like it was full of adventure and trials and tribulations. So with that, please welcome Kandi Spangler.
All right, I am much louder. My husband will attest to that. I think.
Thank you.
That is open. It's okay. It's okay. Nothing. It's fine. So, first of all, thank you
Yeah, you're welcome.
for allowing me to come out here. I spoke last December about Nepal, and travel's become a thing that I've really enjoyed doing. This is somehow fast forward. There we go. And so I reached out and I said, I'd like to share this experience with people, and I would love to invite the Colorado GS girls. So I'm really excited that both groups are here tonight. We're able to do this together because, we have a huge presence in Paonia. We're talking about this year already. We do the ride, what is it?
100,000
100,000 foot, yeah. I haven't done that one yet. But anyways, I really appreciate having everybody in the same room because we share this passion of motorcycling. And I will say for Carl and Joel, if you guys were pretty miserable on your trip, you are going to really enjoy this one. All right? So just a little bit about myself. So yes, I've somehow rapidly grown up in the adventure motorcycling community. In 2014, which is when I met Sherry, we went to a free training clinic. If you hear anything from me on a consistent basis, it's the value of training. Training has made me what I am today and the abilities that I have to go enjoy the adventures even more than I ever imagined. So much so that some people saw some talent in me, and I ended up going on to try out for the GS Trophy, and I was a two-time U.S. women's team. I have never been to the trophy like my friend Bettina here, but I have gone pretty far. I've gone to Spain, but more importantly, I've got to make some great friends along the way, and it's allowed me to be in places like this to share my passion with you. I'm an MSF rider coach. I enjoyed training so much back in 2016. I became a coach, and then pretty quickly thereafter started teaching off-road. I no longer teach BRCs. They're a little boring to me, but I super enjoy teaching off-road and advanced riding. I'm really excited to hear Jared's going to be running your program. If you haven't seen that guy ride, he is impressive. It is fun to watch him. And then I'm also an adventure traveler. And, really it doesn't matter what bike you're on, right? We're all out there to go adventure. That's what we do. So I'd like to ask the question, what does adventure mean? Well, this is the actual definition of adventure. In my mind, every motorcycle is an adventure bike, right? We're all out there to find our own adventure. This picture was taken from the Wyoming BDR last year. If anybody has done the Wyoming BDR when there's been a rain shower, this is what will happen. There will be bikes everywhere on a short section that should have taken us, an hour or two, ended up taking us 7 hours. So it's a lot of fun. All right. So, this is not working. Yeah, if everything goes as planned, have you guys heard this? If everything goes as planned, it's not an adventure. All right. So this is the title of my presentation. If everybody remembers the Apollo 13 crew, what did they call that mission? Do you remember? The successful failure. And that is truly what I experienced on my trip to Patagonia. We had planned on going down with a group over New Year's Eve. You can see the dates there. It was about 2 weeks long. And we couldn't think of a better way to spend, coming into 2023. So there's two critical elements in adventure riding. Does anybody have an idea what those two critical things are in any adventure riding? Preparation. All right. What else? The bike. I'm thinking more like, what do you need to equip yourself with? Money? Your what? Your jacket?
Good attitude.
Good attitude. More than anything else, you need to have a good attitude. All right, what's the second thing?
The right people.
The right people? You're kind of getting ahead of me, but absolutely.
How you respond to intervening variables.
How you respond. So the second thing you need to concern yourself with is a good sense of humor. How you respond to things. These are two critical elements to adventure riding.
Can Joel tell you one of his mantras?
What is your mantra, Joel?
Please.
Keep your options open and remain flexible as reasonably possible.
Keep your options open and remain flexible for as long as possible. I love it. So on a multi-day trip, there's actually one more element. You touched upon it. And that is being with the right people. On a multi-day trip, this is very critical. Be very selective about the people you travel with and make sure they have elements 1 and 2, because it will be critical. All right, so this is a story about how attitude, a great sense of humor, and solid friendships got through a pretty ugly 2 weeks. With those three things, you can get through just about anything, and I'm going to prove it to you. Day 0. I had just returned back to Colorado after getting through the Southwest debacle of going home for the holidays. Oh yes, I was in that. I made it home 20 hours before this flight was to leave. Barely. We go, it was supposed to be Denver, Houston, Houston, Buenos Aires. Well, lo and behold, there was a mechanical in Denver. And we lost Buenos Aires on the first day. The next day, we waited in Houston. We went ahead down to Houston, got a hotel. There was a mechanical. They put us up in a hotel. And then we took our 10-hour flight from Houston down to Buenos Aires a day late. No worries. We'll catch up with the group. We arrive at the airport. When we land, we hear that 2 of my travel mates, they didn't get their bags. So we had heard that one of their bags had made it overnight. So when we arrived at the airport, we were supposed to wait for our driver at a specific location where he was not at. When we finally found him, then he decided to go retrieve the bag, which made us late to go from that airport to the other airport in a foreign country, where we arrived 45 minutes before our flight, having to pay for extra luggage and make it on our flight on time. No stress at all. This IT stuff that I had going on, it's a walk in the park. So we were a little stressed, a little thirsty, a little tired. Yay, adventure. So then we hop on our domestic flight that we barely make. We're on another 3-hour flight. At 4 p.m., we land in Rio Gallegos. We are there. This is where our itinerary starts. Or so we thought. When we land, we are greeted by a guy with our name on a sign. He loads up our bags. He speaks no English. We hop in the car without food or water, or we could have probably used the bathroom, but we're there, so we hop in. For the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, we rode on a dusty dirt road in the middle of nowhere with a warning signal going off in his car every 9 seconds, 5 beeps in a row. So excited to be starting this trip. It was a little stressful. This was that drive. When we finally arrived, we got to this wonderful estancia. It was really delightful. Like, it was one of those places where you're in the middle of nowhere, you can start to see the ocean, and you're like, okay, this was hard, but at least we got through the troubled part of our trip. Or so we thought. After some water, a very stiff whiskey, those of you who know me know I like my whiskey. I was able to get a shower, calm down, and I got to see all my friends who had just returned from seeing penguins. And they had got on their bikes for the first time, and I was like, okay, now it feels like a vacation. We at least made it through the travel part. So we feasted on empanadas and lamb, and we were excited to get started. This is the crew. These are the folks that put this all together. This is our friends Sean Thomas and Louise Powers, and then we had Dario and Nacho, who were on-site guides for this trip. They do a lot of stuff with rawhide. Some of you might even be familiar with them. Dario supposedly spoke no English until like the last day, so. So Sean and Louise handpicked 9 people that they knew how to ride, and knew what sort of attitudes and sense of humor they had, which is really critical that they did, because what we faced over the next several days, that would prove to be tested. All right, so note, the bikes are provided by a rental company. For those of you that follow me on social media, I might have gotten a little social media justice type thing. But we rented them out of Buenos Aires. You're in the middle of nowhere when you get your bike. You kind of have not a whole lot of say on what you get, right? They deliver them to this location. So day 2, Shannon and I get up early because the guy said, look, you gotta go check out the penguins. It's super worth it. So we're like, that's fine. I don't mind getting up early. We get up, head out there, go see some penguins by 7 a.m. so we could be back for breakfast. We got to see thousands of penguins that nest in the scrub brush down there that time of year. This was also our first exposure to the wind. So down there, they're well known for their wind. We were just getting hit with it constantly. And it was pretty stiff at this point, but these little guys were super cute. And then Shannon went and stood in, they're kind of like ants. When they go to the water and back, they follow each other. Well, Shannon seemed to really interrupt that, and they got jammed up. And then they were like, let's just go for it. So they decided to go ahead and start across. So we head back to the ranch, we eat breakfast, we suit up, pack up. This is the first time we see our bikes. This is the bike that most of us got. This is obviously a marketing photo. This is a beautiful 1200 GS. We were told it's less than a year old. 1200 GS. Just saying. Yeah, right. Okay, just throwing that out there. what we got, this is what we had ordered, because the 1200s were a little more expensive. We had 8 of us had 1200 GSs. One had an 800 GS, and we had one on a GSA. This is what it felt like we got. I'm exaggerating. I get that. However, one of the bikes would actually look like this at some point, but more on that later. So, couple of tips if you guys are going to do travel like this. Make sure you pay with a credit card. Make sure that all the cash is not up front. I have a whole list of rules so you don't make the same mistakes we did. These are lessons learned in hindsight. But you're pretty vulnerable at this point. You've paid a lot of money to show up at a remote location to go have an adventure. So we're gonna hop on the bikes and we're gonna go. And we're super excited. This is our first day. We're finally suited up. It's kind of cold, it's very windy. There's 3 women in this group. There are 11 total, 3 women. All of us are height challenged. We have 2 support vehicles, 1 extra bike, it was an F800. And then we also had the GSA in the trailer. And that is because one of the guys' bags still didn't make it. So Sean graciously lent the other rider his riding gear and let him ride, and he got in the truck, which was really awesome of him to do that. We had no time, Shannon and I had no time to attach our SAE cords for heated. Even though it was kind of cold, we're like, that's fine, we're gonna keep warm off of excitement today. And then, that's Shannon back there, that's my husband, by the way, and then I'm up front. We start to fire up and take off, and neither of our bikes start. It's a really good start to the trip. So Dario comes over and helps us. He did some weird turning the key off, back on. It wasn't anything we were doing. They were pretty low on juice. Very windy. All right, so today's route, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the border crossings. So today's route, we have 2 border crossings. And then we're gonna plan on being down in Ushuaia for New Year's Eve, which is really cool. But with New Year's Eve comes a lot of other traffic. And I don't think our guides really planned on the additional time needed at the border crossings. It happens. And then we also had a ferry crossing. Okay, so we have a little bit of stuff going on today. So we leave the estancia, and within 30 minutes, in a 20-knot wind, which they're always crosswinds. They were never headwinds, they were never tailwinds. They were always a crosswind. We have our first mechanical. So this is one of the 800 that we have, the F800 GS. So Phil's riding along and he goes, and I'm riding sweep that day because Sean is in a vehicle. So Louise is leading, I'm riding sweep. He stops all of a sudden, I'm like, what's going on, buddy? And he goes, I'm leaking a little fluid. So I said, okay, let's stop here. And we put our kickstands down and, well, that's not right. And you can see this crack in the frame. So that was within 30 minutes. Nobody dropped bikes, nobody did anything. Okay? So with the 2 support vehicles behind us with the spare bike, I said, you know, I'm gonna run up ahead to make sure everybody else knows we're fine. And I know that our mechanic and our support vehicles are behind. So 2 people stay there, I go ahead, and I go up to tell the group. So this is where we're on gravel for the first time on strange bikes in 20-knot winds. Us short people have to plan our stops. We can't just, come to a stop anywhere because you get a gust of wind. We only have 1 foot down. So stopping for all of us was a bit of a challenge, but especially for us shorter folks. So the group waits Some of us left our helmets on, and we waited for about 40 minutes because the wind was so strong and you're so exposed. Again, Amy and I are hanging out. She's having a good time, great attitude, and a great sense of humor because I'm like, hey, guess what? We have a cracked frame already. So this is adventure, and Amy was like, that's fine, I'm here with my friends, we're gonna have a great time, okay? So, finally, 40 minutes later, I'm like, why is this taking so long? All you have to do is swap a bike. They finally catch up to us. Well, as it turns out, Phil is now on Sean's GSA. That's because the other 800 already had a crack in the frame as well. So 30 miles into the trip, we have 2 bikes down. This is day 1, folks. Hopefully we got all the issues out of the way. But not so much.
They have any triumphs?
I would have settled for a KTM.
You should have started with one.
So every trip has its challenges, right? That's adventure. That's what we sign up for. But we just had ours very early in the trip. And these are pretty big failures. So now we're just like, okay, hopefully this gets better. Let's forge ahead. All right, so this is our first border crossing. The wind was intense. It gets more intense as the trip goes on. But hey, we're out here riding motorcycles in Patagonia. Like, we're excited. Life is good. So we get to the ferry and there's a big long line. This is to cross the Strait of Magellan. Very windy. All of us had to angle the bikes correctly so we could put it on the side stand and not have it blow over. The wind was strong enough that even if it was on the side stand, it would definitely blow the bike over. Yeah, hence the cracked frames, right? So we really had to be conscientious of how we were coming to a stop. So obviously this is Steve and Sean's, this is the GS Trophy gear from last year, and Steve is in his gear. And then us 2 short girls, this is me and Amy. We're having fun. We're in Patagonia, we're celebrating New Year's Eve, this is gonna be great. All right, so this municipal building is right before you get on the ferry. We parked there because they like to load all the bikes at the same time, because they like to park them to the side. So sometimes they get all the vehicles on and then the bikes, or they might put the bikes on first. In this case, they wanted us over in this section. They had a waiting area, bathrooms. We would become very familiar with this municipal building in the coming days, but they had cats, so we were able to make some friends. There were dogs everywhere too. So finally the ferry arrives. When this thing was rolling up, because we didn't know what to expect, I was immediately wondering, like, how slippery is this decking gonna be? Because it just throws down right at the edge of the water and you drive up on it. Had no issues. The deck is very secure, and we drove right up on it and parked our bikes. So, water crossing, yeah, first water crossing.
Saltwater.
Yeah, saltwater. No, it's saltwater. Yeah, it connects the Atlantic and the Pacific. So here we are on the boat, all boarded up, and we're honestly, like, we're in a good place here. Still very windy. I mean, look at my hair. That's not just helmet hair. That's like wind hitting me and everything else. I'd like for you guys to note how calm the seas are here. How calm the seas are. Yeah. And of course, leaving shore, it's a 45-minute water crossing. I have no other pictures from this day. Neither do my travel mates, and I'll tell you why. When we got across, we get to the next border crossing. It takes us a while to get through lines, and now we're pressed for time to make it to our next destination. It was cold, it was windy, you're riding pretty fast. At this point, we're on pavement, but we arrive at our hotel after 11 p.m. It stays light out there until about 10:30 this time of year, January, because it's their summer. We wolf some food down and go straight to bed. Next day we will be better, we hope. So day 3, it's a relatively short day, which is great because it's New Year's Eve. In hindsight, I kind of wish every day was 150 to 200 miles, but it's a little unrealistic in Patagonia. I mean, there's literally nothing for hundreds of miles between cities there. The landscape ended up getting, it was flat at first and very open, and then it started getting mountainous. We had 2 people run out of gas that day. Nacho had gas cans with him. Again, gas stations are few and far between. You have to be very careful and travel with somebody that knows what they're doing so you don't run into issues. It was not a big deal. We had gas with us. And this is one of the gas stations. They all seem to have these like really friendly dogs. And my husband and I love animals. So this dog lived at this gas station. Like we saw him on the way back through. We ended up, we started to see some really fantastic views here. In fact, we got a group photo up here. Notice there are 10 bikes here because again, Sean's in a truck. He had given his GSA to Phil, and we had 2 bikes down and no backups at this point. Nacho and Dario are trying to figure out how to trade some bikes out at this point in different locations, so they're working on that. But several more of these bikes would ultimately meet their untimely demise. It's a good looking picture. So, but for now we're having fun. Like we really enjoyed, I knew about half of the riders. I got to know the rest of them on the route, and it was a lot of fun, and we had a great time together. Again, attitude, great sense of humor, and creating some solid friendships. The short girls were having fun. 2 of us are 5'2", 1 is 5'3". We're all pretty height challenged. And eventually we'd all have to learn to ride all of the different bikes if we wanted to ride. Amy was originally on a lower GS, but at the end of the day, we just had to ride whatever we could get. All right, so I don't know, for those of you that don't know, you probably know this. Argentina loves to insist that the Falkland Islands are theirs. There's this big debate. So they make sure you know by putting signs everywhere. The Falkland Islands are ours. Okay, so this is coming into Ushuaia. And then we get, this great picture. A lot of you have seen this. It's a monument coming into town. And for me, it was certainly a bucket list item. I have always wanted to go to Ushuaia. So to do it on 2 wheels was pretty spectacular. We got some great pictures while we were there. This was across the street. What does that say?
Castor invasion or infestations.
It's a beaver invasion. I thought it was inappropriate that the 3 women got a picture next to the beaver invasion.
Nice.
Totally random. And then we got a great group photo in front of the Ushuaia sign. There's this great empanada place there. It was the best empanadas that we had on the entire trip. And then we went to the hotel where we would eventually celebrate New Year's Eve. It was a beautiful hotel overlooking the bay, which is where you go to go down to Antarctica. And this is where you would catch your ship to go down there. There was a local airport there. So we all decided, hey, yesterday we had a long day. We're gonna get into our rooms, take a nap because it's gonna be New Year's Eve celebration. They set this room up for us to celebrate New Year's Eve. Wow. And we were just awestruck because it was such a fabulous room just for us. The hotel put on a show as part of like the pre-New Year's Eve celebration. So we had tango dancers there. And then we enjoyed cocktails out on the veranda. It was a beautiful night, a little cool, but we had a great time, dinner in, and then, celebrations. But we all knew that tomorrow we were going to have to get up and hit the road. So right after, the stroke of midnight, we headed back to our rooms and wanted to get some rest. We all talked about there was no place we'd rather be than right there on New Year's Eve. That sentiment would be challenged over the next several days. But it was a spectacular experience and one that I will never forget. Day 4, New Year's Day, we start at 8 a.m. Shannon and I finally attach our SAE cords, so we have heat. Today's planned route, we're going to go back from where we came, one border crossing, but first we go to the park. So we all ride down to the park. This is the National Park in Ushuaia. Everybody is probably, if you've followed anybody's travels down there, you have seen this sign. We end up meeting some other riders. So there was a group of riders on GS's and their significant others were riding with them. And they noticed that Amy and Louise and I were on our own bikes, and they were like, what do you got going on there? And you're not very high. How do you do this thing? And they were really impressed by that. And so Louise speaks some Spanish, and she was able to say, like, you could do this too. Like, you don't have to ride on the back if you don't want to. So, I know. So we got some pictures with these guys. They really enjoyed meeting us. And so now we're on our way out, heading to Porvenir. That was our destination. It was still very cold and very windy. You can see by these trees, they get a lot of wind there. I can't say that enough. Pictures don't capture wind. And it wears you out. It really wears you out. Over the next very long stretch of dirt road after this picture was taken, we experience our next really 3 challenges, okay? The first one is Steve injures his eye. Something flies into his eye. Somehow he had eye protection on. It gets into his eye, and we think it probably scratched the cornea or something like that. It really got him good. And Sean hits a bird with his handguard, and it rips it off. So he has blood down the side of him, and luckily he didn't get hurt, but it ripped the handguard off. So those are the 2 things. So this is all on New Year's Day. Then we get to the gas station, and Louise runs up to my husband. She goes, hey, where's your other pannier? On an already fabulous trip, my husband maybe overreacted a little bit. But he's just like, you gotta be kidding me. So because we're doing all these border crossings, you tend to keep your passport and paperwork pretty handy. Luckily, it wasn't in that pannier. He had a $300 down jacket in that pannier and a couple other things, but not, the end of the world. So we're gonna make the best of this. We go in, Louise starts doctoring up Steve's eye, and we're just gonna try to make the best of this. We're gonna try to have a good attitude, damn it. We're gonna have a good sense of humor if we can muster it, and we're gonna enjoy our friends.
We had
So-
Argentinian ice cream.
There you go. That place had everything. You could have lunch there if you wanted. Well, while Steve's getting his eye worked on, a car pulls up and holds out a pannier. He says, is this one of yours? And we're like, no. Yeah, I found it 50 miles back. Because we had no idea where we lost it. And so we tried to give them money. We were so thankful. They didn't want to take anything. They were locals. They were fabulous people. And so we got the camera back. Was our luck turning around? All right, let's see. So we're not sure what happened to Steve's eye, but he ended up riding like this for several hours. What's interesting about this, and I hope you all do this at some point, we later talked about this at dinner. How many of you closed an eye and tried to ride today? Every one of us went, yeah, and it really sucked. We were starting to lose daylight. It was really tough for him to see. But if we didn't have enough challenges already for the day, remember we had a bird, we had an eye injury, we had a lost pannier. Now, we have a bent rim.
2 slides.
Whoa! So, our injured eye guy gets in the truck because it's getting dark. It's really hard. He was going pretty slow. God bless him. Like, I don't know how he did it for as long as he did. And so, Don took his bike, Phil went in the truck, and we kept going. And then Don's bike goes in the back of Nacho's truck. Since we already have the 2 disabled 800s on the trailer. 3 bikes down, if anybody's counting.
How far? How did he bend the rim?
So far. What's that?
How did he dig the rim?
Say again?
How did he dig the rim?
He hit a rock that was in the road. Like, these roads are graded, but every once in a while you have potholes and you have rocks. The potholes, honestly, it was probably a pothole. Some of them are clustered in a way that you just can't miss it. So we have a long stretch along the ocean. It was absolutely beautiful riding along the Strait of Magellan. The really beautiful colors, the watercolors. Again, the wind, for whatever reason, is always a crosswind, no matter what direction you go. That's just a law of physics there in Patagonia. We end this day at a hotel that we arrive after 9 p.m. because we had some delays, obviously. We're at a brand new hotel, and because it's New Year's Day, they had to have dinner catered in. Shower, bed, get sleep as soon as you can. All right, so we've had our challenges up to this point. Would you agree? This slide is meant to say, embrace the suck. You guys have ever heard that term? Embrace the suck. All right. We had already endured a lot of suck. Bike issues, lost bags, long days. It was starting to take a toll on us mentally. Right? So this is where it started accumulating. You can get through some challenges, but to try to have a good attitude every day, that now you have to work at it, right? All right, so here's today's planned route. So this was actually changed from the gray route because the winds, if you can believe it, were increasing. So we were going to take the gray route, but they had shut down the ferry to Port Aransas, and we decided instead to go back and take the ferry that we had come across originally and go back up to Rio Gallegos and then to El Calafate. That's a big day. Do you see the mileage there?
Yep.
450 miles, okay? And the winds got worse. So ultimately, this is what happened, and I'm going to explain why. Only 136 miles happened that day. There was a lot of back and forth to the ferry because they ended up shutting the ferry down because it was so windy and the seas were so high. So we started off the day with a gas fill up, Notice how the gas stations have full service attendants. So we would pull up, fill all the bikes up, and then Dario or Nacho would pay for it. This is important for later. Just saying. So this is one of the videos I took with my Cena. It does not do it justice. Like, we were getting blown all over the place. We later pulled up an app that said we were getting 50 knot winds, gusting up to 70. If you want to know how strong of a wind you can ride a bike in, it's surprisingly more than I thought it was. You have to keep your speed up, but not too much, because of the gusts, you'll end up going into the other lane. Because you're at an angle, it's very difficult. It was challenging a lot of us. So getting battered by the wind, having to really be on, it really drains you physically. Okay, so we even had a couple of drop bikes, like just coming to a stop sign. That was one of the guys, actually, he got blown off the road. There was just nothing he could do about it. It was strong wind. Somehow the ladies kept it upright.
Lower center of gravity.
Thank you. It's a very low center of gravity. So shortly after this video, and I don't have a picture of this, we're riding along on a dirt road, and we lose Dario and Nacho for a while. So apparently, the axle on the trailer broke. Now it's just comical, right? So they leave the two 800s and the broken axle trailer behind and call up Ruta 40 and say, hey, oh, that was also their trailer, I believe. Said, here's all your stuff. This is where it's at. Come and get it. It's hard to describe the wind. Pictures and videos don't really do it justice, but constant battering, you're gonna see the flags in this picture and those are big flags, like it's stiff. So the ferry's not running due to high seas. We wait in line for a long time. There's a huge line. So we wait, and I found a kitty, and wait. So after several hours, we go back into town, trying to find a coffee shop or somewhere to go to. It's about a 20-minute ride. Coffee shop's closed because, it's the day after New Year's. We end up going to a hotel. So going into town, I should have said this story before, but so coming into town before we're going to the coffee shop, Louise is leading, and I'm riding sweet, and there's the rest of us in between. And up in the distance, you see this green thing tumbling through the field, down a hill. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, is that a porta-john? And it is headed straight for Louise. I mean, no joke. It had like aim right on her. And I see her slow down, and it was just like, she almost got taken out by a porta-john. Like, it's the funniest thing you've ever heard of. So later we found the porta-john, and that was the one that almost took her out. So while in town, we went to this hotel to wait it out, and we were having a lot of meetings at this point because we don't know if we're going to make it to our intended destination. And so we grabbed lunch early because if we can get on the ferry later, we need to haul. We can't stop for dinner. So we have like a 5 p.m. dinner, head back to the ferry, wait some more, waited another 2 hours out there before we said screw it. Went back to this hotel. I had a whiskey, and I went straight to bed. So now we were changing plans. Today, we have a new plan. Today's route, a whopping 300 miles. We want to make it to El Calafate, 1 border crossing, plus this police checkpoint right around this area, the circle. We have breakfast, and then Dario and Nacho were waiting in line, and they said, get out here. I think they're running the ferries. So we head out there and stand in line for just a little bit. Will we make it on? Oh, we do. Now, I want you to see the C's on this one. They actually did not let us leave our bikes because they would fall over.
Do they have you anchor the bikes now?
They did not anchor, they just said to hold them.
Yeah.
Somebody, like people wanted to go up and get videos and pictures, and so Sean ended up staying back to hold a bike while somebody went up. What does he do? Lets it go, and it drops. Never trust Sean with your bike. It was enough to make you seasick for sure. And then this is us on those seas again, holding our bikes up. Okay, so once across, the rental company ends up getting us replacements for the two 800s. They give us a water-cooled 1200 and an F700 GS as a backup. Aren't they swell? Actually, the water-cooled bike was in the best condition of all the bikes. No joke. So now, Sean is finally on a bike. Phil is on the water-cooled 1200, and we have one backup.
Sean's on the 700.
Sean eventually does get on the 700. All right. So, and Steve had finally received his bag in Ushuaia, so Sean has his gear back. The winds calmed down just a little bit. When I say that, now we're talking about 35 to 40 knots, right? We arrive at this police checkpoint, and they're letting cars through. You know, you have to stop, and then they go through. We get there, and they stop us, and they go, "It's unsafe for you." And we're like, "Do you know what we just rode through? Like, this is nothing." And they said, "We're sorry. We have no say in this." So we waited. And waited. And they wouldn't let us go. But there's Brian. He's like, "We want to go that way. You don't know. You don't understand." We had no place to go out of the wind. We had to go on the other side of the building to stay out of the wind. There were no bathrooms. There was no nothing. We waited for hours. But again, we made the best of it. Good attitude, great sense of humor, and being around with friends. So after 3 hours, they let us go. They get the call, "You are free to go." We have hundreds of miles to go, and it's late afternoon, so we haul ass. No time for pictures. Amy, who was a ray of sunshine through this whole thing, she says, "I'm losing steam. This is not what I signed up for. I've never even crossed the California state line. I don't ride in the rain." And she's like, "And we're doing this?" So we're all trying to get ourselves through. So we arrive in El Calafate at 11 p.m. This is a picture of the hotel from the following morning. We get there, and I said, "You know what? I like this town. I've been to this town before. I went down and hiked in Patagonia 6 years ago. I like El Calafate. I'm not eating another hotel meal. I'm going out." So Shannon and Amy and I, we decide we're going to get out and we're going to have a meal in an experienced town. So we go into town. The restaurants, they stay up pretty late there. We went and had a meal, and the rest of them had dinner at the hotel. And Amy's like, I'm not doing well. And I had also heard that day that one of the other riders had actually fallen asleep while riding. We were not in a good place, and I knew it. And this is important for all of us. If you're in that situation, you have to speak up. Because the alternative is no good for anyone. So if you see that, if you see others going through that experience, it is up to you to make comments and make sure that people know that it's unsafe. So we came back to the hotel. I had told Louise and Sean, that we were having some issues, with some of the group members, we really needed a day off. We're already behind a day, obviously, and over this time of year, it's their busy season. So it's very hard for them to change hotel reservations. They were in a tough spot. So again, we go out that night. I forgot to tell you guys know my 3 levels of fun, right? Level 1 fun, you're having fun while it's happening. Level 2 fun is, it's supposed to be fun, but it's not fun while it's happening. And level 3 fun is, it's supposed to be fun, but it's not fun while it's happening, and it's not fun to talk about later. Okay, so we have a fun rating system. Amy was at level 3. Okay, Amy was at a level 3 fun. But we had a good night that night. We got to get out and see a little bit. They really wanted to go see Puerto Moreno Glacier the next day before we got back on the bikes. And I said, I need some sleep. I knew that I had hit my limit. I had seen the glacier before. So the next morning, everybody else got to see this, but Shannon and I stayed behind because, again, we knew our own situation. Ironically, 2 of our travel mates decided they were feeling a little worn out too and got rip-roaring drunk that night and didn't come back until 4 a.m. So the suggested day off became a mandatory day off. So it is a beautiful glacier. I wish we would have gone knowing that we had the day off, but we didn't at the time. But the call was made that we're taking the day off. So we had a great day there in El Calafate. The next day we see the newspaper, and here's what it said. Strong gusts of winds exceeding 100 kilometers an hour. Even by Patagonian standards, this was high wind. What we experienced was unusual. So the town, of course, they have these great lakes and views and things that we can go see. And Amy and Shannon and I went out and had some fun. They had afternoon tea and churros in town. And that night we got to go to the barbecue place that they had originally intended for us to go out to dinner. And we had a great time. All right, so the next day, day 8, El Calafate to Gregores. Did I say that right? Gregores. This was our planned route, an aggressive 300-mile day, but we are now 2 days behind. We need to get back on schedule, but we're rested, so that's good. But adventure strikes again. Here's, well, not adventure strikes again. This was our original planned route here, but because we had time to make up, we were planning a 460-mile day. At least there were no border crossings, okay? It was an aggressive plan. Early morning, because we knew we had to get up and make some miles, so this is like 7 in the morning. We get on the bikes and we head north. This is passing the entrance to El Chalten, another one of my favorite areas. Our attitude has improved. That one day off, everybody is feeling refreshed. We got energy. We got a great attitude. The wind is still wearing us down pretty quick at this point. And then we stopped to take in the views. Got to see this little guy as well. So we had some great scenery, not a lot of time to take pictures. We're trying to make up some time. The terrain was starting to become more mountainous, but again, go, go, go. Not a lot of time for pictures. Obviously still windy. Not quite as windy, but still windy. So we're getting to our lunch stop that day. Brian runs out of gas a half mile before we get there. Luckily we have gas. And this was where we were supposed to stay that night. It was a really cool cabin. I know Rawhide stops at this location all the time. And this is where we had lunch. And they also had fuel on site, so we fueled up in a very weird, archaic way where we got the gas, out of a hose and then transported it over. It was weird. It took forever too. But again, we had some really great scenery. We're still starting to feel a little worn out. It's a long day. After lunch and fueling up, we're about 2 hours for lunch. We get back on the road. We have over 250 miles remaining. After a 50-mile stretch of dirt, Shannon is complaining about his front suspension. Those of you that have been following my social media posts, this is where it happens. Okay? He starts feeling like I can hear him in the comms, and he's just complaining like crazy about his front fork. He did since day one. It was never good, but they're old bikes. But he's getting hammered, and the wind is relentless. And we get to the end of the road where we hit pavement, and we're waiting for the rest of the other folks because we're trying to make up time. Sean, myself, Amy stops, Shannon stops, and he puts his kickstand down and he says, I have to pee. So he walks over, his bike right here, and he's getting ready to pee, and the wind knocks his bike over. And I really wanted to grab a picture. Super wanted to grab a picture. I knew it wouldn't go over well if I did that. So I'm like, your bike just fell over. I'm still on comms with him, and he's like, damn it. So he finishes up, turns around, and there's oil on the ground. He has a cracked cylinder head cover. I don't know if the crash bars were already cracked. I don't really care for those crash bars, but whatever. But it had cracked, or was already cracked, and went into the cylinder head cover, and we thought, this is it. This is gonna, knock us out for the day. Shannon was at level 3 fun here. But we start to take, the thing apart, and Nacho and Dario arrive, and miraculously, not their first rodeo. He has a spare cylinder head cover. So now we're in high wind with dirt and debris blowing everywhere, taking a cylinder head cover off, trying to keep the dirt and debris out of that, and reinstalling it. All went pretty well. It took about 30, 45 minutes, and we're back on the road. Not much later, Steve starts to complain about his rear suspension. This is just a picture of you can't really see anything here until later, but he's talking about it. So, we can't do anything about it. Like, we can see there's a problem, but we can't really do anything about it. We have no trailer. The F700 is in the back of Nacho's truck, and we have miles to go, so we just keep going. The scenery is really good. Like, you gotta remember, don't forget to check out the scenery. This is why we're here, right? So the day is super long, everyone is tired. It's starting to get dark after this, and there are no lights. When the sun goes down, there are no lights anywhere. I feel like we're gonna end up camping on the side of the road. So at 11 p.m., we finally pull in to the place where we're gonna stay that night. I am now mentally depleted. I am not in a good place. We got to the hotel. We couldn't even get changed because they were closing the dining room. So you had to leave your gear on, go eat some dinner, and then you can take your bags to the cabins that were located around the facility. I am now at a level 3. My attitude is not good, and I know it. Day 9, we're gonna go from where we stayed last night, Lago Posadas, to Coyhaique. That was our planned route. Another 300-mile day. if I'm going to make it, I have got to get my head right. So I got up that morning, I got a shower. Here's whiskey at 7 a.m. I like how you think. I didn't, but that sounds really good. Here's what actually happened, because again, the day was planned a little too aggressively. This was much shorter, one border crossing, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't another long day, okay? So I get up, kickstands up, we're supposed to be at 10 a.m. because they don't serve breakfast until 9, shower, and I go out to this lake on the dock, and I said, I need to get my head right. The only thing that I can control is how I react to the situation. So I have techniques for like changing my head and getting it right. So then I sit down at breakfast, I'm doing good, and it's Argentina, so breakfast isn't ready at 9:30, or at 9:45, or at 9:50, and we have time to make up. And so we all get up and we leave, and we had no breakfast. Everything was a bit of a struggle on this trip. So we leave the lodge and we finally get to see the scenery around the lodge that we didn't get to see the night before. Louise captured some really cool video of us leaving out of the lodge area. And incidentally, you know, I think I ride okay in the dirt. You guys know who I am, and I ride the dirt pretty frequently. And then all of a sudden I couldn't really seem to ride around curves in the dirt. Well, it's because my rear tire was flat. And I don't have a TPMS monitor because these are the most basic of bikes that we were given. So we stopped and I'm like, that's why I couldn't get around that bend very easily. Notice that my attitude, however, has completely changed. I decided that day that I was going to have fun, damn it. And so I did. We're heading now to the best border crossing of the trip and the best scenery of the trip. It was really spectacular, and I am having fun despite the fact that we had to fill up my tire every 3 hours. Amy was really key. She had such a great attitude the whole time. And we had some of the best riding. I'm following Sean here, headed to the border crossing. And just really breathtaking scenery. Shannon's in my rearview mirror there. And then once we got to the border crossings, there were these cool border dogs that were just like playing around, having a good time. I mean, it looks like a movie scene to me, really. And so we hung out. I got to make friends with local wildlife and met some other folks. This guy knew Sean right away. He runs the GS Trophy in Mexico. He was doing a tour down there. Again, more of the best riding of the whole trip was on this day. But clearly things were going too well, right? Something's surely going to happen. So Steve's bike with the bag rear shock, I'm following right behind him. Now I have Sean up front, Louise in the back, I'm somewhere in the middle. Steve's bike starts to smoke. Well, that's not a rear shock issue. It starts to smoke, and then he slows way down, and then he pulls over to the side of the road. Shuts down, and it will not restart. And he keeps, and I'm like, I don't think that's gonna help. Let's just wait a second. So the F700 comes out. All right, so Steve's bike goes in, it does not restart. Louise takes the 700, she gives her bike, the 1200, to Steve. And here's what the rental company later saw when they tore down the engine. Kind of blew out one of the valves there in the cylinder, yeah. But wait, there's more. This was his rear shock. That's what it looked like after they did the teardown. But we're fine. We had the 700, which I got to ride at some point too. And it was not my old 700. It was a super piece of shit. So back on the road, we keep riding. It's a little warmer. Poor Louise riding on that thing. She didn't complain at all. She's riding that 700, which I later found out I would have complained a lot. It's getting warmer. It's getting more tropical. We are heading north. The wind is less now. We have mountains to block us. And really, some of the bluest waters you have ever seen in your life. And they were all different colors. Sadly, because we were so rushed, we didn't get a lot of pictures of them. But it was really a beautiful scenery that we were going through. Now, during this time, Shannon's complaining about his front fork again. So I usually just turn him off. But it was getting worse and worse. This is a waterfall. I actually turned around and went back to catch a picture of that waterfall because it was so beautiful. So Shannon's complaining about his suspension, and then he pulls over. Now we're seeing fluid. We think it's radiator fluid, but it's leaking fluid. We checked it out, but again, not much we can do. We don't have a spare bike now, so we continue on for hours. And he complains that we're back on comms, and he's hitting potholes and just like yelling. And I'm like, you're exaggerating a little bit. And I'm like, will you please just let me take the bike? And I'm thinking he's being a bit of a baby about it. So he lets me, after much cajoling, switch bikes, and he takes mine. Well, the joke was on me. He's like, this thing's luxurious. I get on it, and I hit my first tiny pothole, and I'm like, good Lord! Like, it felt like it wanted to break your arms as you went over it. And I'm like, this is gonna do irreparable damage. Like, it's hitting hard. So I slow way down, which we don't have the luxury of time. But I'm like, you're gonna really destroy this bike. Unfortunately, I think the damage is done. I slow down so much that Sean finally says, we can't go this slow. Shannon, you take my GSA, I get back on mine. He takes Shannon's bike, and he said, we had to stop before we could get to our destination. We ended up getting this little hotel at 9:30 at night, and this is what his front fork looked like. So that is the front fork. Yes, it is bent. And this is what it looked like when the rental company tore it down later. No wonder he was complaining. There was never any fluid on his fork the entire trip. There was no fluid in the front fork when he got it. The fluid that we actually saw that day was radiator fluid because the fork had compressed and pinched the radiator hose.
Oh, man.
So 9:30 at night, it's still light there, and I'm like, could this trip get any worse? So I try to get my head right, I grab a beer, I go out to the lake. I'm tired, a little cranky, but I manage a smile. And I'm just here by myself having a beer. That night, Amy and I kind of bond a little bit more. We're talking about, like, we paid money for this? What are we doing here? But then we start to laugh because it's kind of comical at this point. And then a couple of our other travel mates come out and we have beers together. And it was a fun night because we're all kind of suffering through this together. So today's route, we're going to be doing 270 miles. Where our end destination is where we were supposed to be the night before. They had never planned on putting 2 bikes in the truck, but we figured it out. So now Shannon's bike is in with Steve's. My rear tire is now completely flat every 2 hours. At breakfast, Amy volunteers to ride in the truck, but Shannon is sick that morning, so she reluctantly says that she'll ride. She was really looking forward to being in the truck that day. And she was just like, I'll go put my So she was a real trooper. She's always got a smile on her face. And so we went and did some dirt roads that morning. About, I'd say 50 miles. We finally get to pavement about 5 miles later, and Brian, he just loves pavement. He's like, finally. And he starts cutting it up, and he's right on Sean's tail. And Sean can ride fast. 5 miles, and then all of a sudden, his bike just stops. Doesn't shut off, it just stops. It does not have any power to the rear wheel. So the drive shaft had clearly snapped. Yeah. How bad do you feel now about your truck?
He's a king.
So, and we're waiting for Dario and Nacho to catch up, which we have no room for another bike because the other truck has all our gear in it. It has a cap on it and everything. Brian is really upset here. He's at level 3. Okay? We're all taking our turns. But now it's my turn to kind of help Brian through this next thing. And so our friends are what makes the difference. So I said, come on, Brian, we're getting a picture. And he's like, all right, let's do it. This shit is fun. It's my sticker here somewhere over here. So we decided that we were going to have fun stuck on the side of the road. And his drive shaft, like I said, it clearly snapped. In the meantime, he starts taking all his gear off because he knows that bike's done. And I said, this is what they discovered in the teardown from the rental company later.
Is that the final drive side or the input shaft?
That was at the rear. Yeah. Not much that duct tape or JB Weld can do here. So I decided, we could take his rear tire, his rear wheel, put it on my bike. So we started using it for spare parts. I think that was actually Louise's idea, and I was just like, it's a great idea, let's do it. So Sean and Louise jumped in, and we decided to grab that. And here's my infamous sticker that everybody had by the end, and you guys will have an opportunity, because sometimes we need reminding that this shit is fun. But we didn't have a bad view while we were waiting for the bike. So meanwhile, Shannon is back in. Rob is out because he's not feeling well. Louise gives me the 700 because her and Sean have to tow a bike to town because we have nowhere to put it. And then Brian takes my 1200 GS. I know this is a lot to follow, but this is musical bikes here. Just remember, I'm on the 700. I get on this thing, and the steering head column is terrifying. As long as you're going in a straight line without accelerating or decelerating, it was fine. If I had to go through a roundabout, I felt I was going to die. It was really bad. So then Sean and Louise stay back. They're going to tow the bike into town. So Nacho says, I will lead you into town. We're going to get gas and we're going to have lunch. So Nacho is in the truck, and we all, like little ducklings, follow him into town. We come into town. He goes into the busy gas station. He goes by the empty pump and parks, and we get in line at the empty pump with a full-service gas attendant there to help us out. We had 3 bikes filled with diesel fuel. That's right, the hits keep on coming. Before Dario arrives and goes, no! You should have seen his face. And then this was the point where I think most of us went, that's it. We're done. Get a charter bus. Take us home. This is the last nail in the coffin. So, they gather their composure. There happens to be a garage across the street. We double up on a bunch of the bikes. They say they're going to get the diesel out. We go to a 2-hour lunch, which is probably what they needed. And they had them fixed. Over lunch, we had beers. We laughed because, you know, this is kind of comical at this point.
The only other option is to cry.
Which, nobody's saying we didn't. But eventually you gotta laugh at this. And, you know, again, Amy, with this fantastic attitude, who was in over her head 5 days earlier, is like, damn it, I'm having fun. And she's like, hey, did you know I can mount a bike from the rear? And I was like, okay, show me. So she decides to show me that she's gonna mount this bike from the rear because she was riding 2 up and she was gonna be on the back. And she nails it. So at this point, we head back, we get the bikes. One's running a little rough, but they're largely okay. Sean volunteers to take the 700 because I told him what a PO. Yeah, it looks like a tiny person on a. It looks like me on my bike. Yeah. So, which was really funny to see. After 30 minutes, Sean decides that the 700 is no bueno. That steering head column was really bad and it was dangerous. So now we're loading up that bike because we had ditched the other bikes because we just needed to make room. And we start playing musical bikes here. We need to get through the last few days. But again, we had some great views along the way. This is a really famous lookout here. For those of you who have followed other travelers, it's a really fun curvy road that we got to ride, and we had some good times. Then we pull into this parking lot and down this ramp, and we had no idea what was happening because we're at kind of a dead end. And we park, and here comes a ferry. And we catch the 8 p.m. ferry across the lake, approaching this beautiful lodge. And the only way you can get there is by a ferry boat. And it was really a beautiful lodge. And we got there at about 9 p.m., of course, because that's how we roll. Got some showers, had dinner at 10 p.m. But we now find out Rob is actually tested positive for COVID. Just keep them coming. So he's getting dinner in his room. Now Sean and Louise have to figure out how they're going to get him to our final destination and quarantine him from the rest of us. So since we got in later than we expected again, they decide, take the morning, enjoy it. We're going to take the 11 a.m. ferry back to the bike. So we enjoyed the hot springs that they had there. And it was a really lovely resort. A lot of geothermal activity around in that area. And very tropical. It's very humid at this point. Really cool foliage and whatnot. This was our group photo getting ready to go. And our last one of the trip. This is day 11. This is, we're getting close to the end here. This is our planned route. Today and tomorrow is all that remains, with Barleoche being our last stop. This wasn't a bad day. We had a stop for lunch. Amy and I are swapping bikes. They had the COVID patient and Louise in one vehicle, and she just had to, get him back. So, which she never tested positive for, thankfully. Rob eats outside while the rest of us are inside having a good old time. We are all really tired, and we all really want this trip to end, but we are having fun. We have one more border crossing, and then our last hotel. Wasn't a great one, another late dinner, and Shannon now has a full-on cold. And then the last day, this is our planned route. Wishing the trip was over. I caught some of them leaving that day. That's how Amy mounts the bike, by the way. She kind of hops alongside of it and does a side stand start. And I'm in the truck. The first section of this road was all dirt, it was all dust. And I chose wisely. Like, there was a ton of dust. Whiteout conditions. You could not see in front of you. It was really bad. Lunch on the last day, we went through another national park. Then it was my turn to ride. We are really happy it's almost over. And finally, we get to our last hotel. This was the best one of the trip. This was our view out of our room. Had a beautiful lake, beautiful blue waters. So day 13, we were planning on having a couple days in Barlioche, but we only had one left. So, because we were late. So we made the best of it. We went around and explored the area. They call it the Lakes region. I'm kind of breezing through this a little fast. But we did find some fun things to do. Really beautiful flowers. If you like flowers, I have a whole catalog of flowers from there. And then this was what was left. Louise and Sean and Phil left. Their flight was canceled, by the way. It was awesome. I was just like, really? It's not over yet? Brian and Steve were off to their next destination. They were going to spend another week there. So these were the 5 that remained. And it's amazing what a little R&R will do for your attitude. So we get to finally go home. Or do we? So for those of you that can think back to January 11th, if you recall, the FAA shut down the airspace system on the day that I was supposed to fly home. And I'm like, you can't make this up. But luckily, it sounds like the airspace opened a little later. Our flights weren't going to be until later, so we head to the airport. And Amy and I get in a tiny car with a bunch of bags. We had to take separate cars. We get there, and we're thinking, we're almost on our way home. I wanted nothing more than to go home. And our flight is delayed by 4 hours, which means we will miss our flight home to the United States.
Well, you're flying to Houston again, or where were you?
Yes. So this flies into the international airport in Buenos Aires, and this means that we would have missed our flight. So we're standing in line that took hours, and Shannon looks over and he goes, hey, wasn't that Azizia the other airport that we flew into when we came in and then switched to the domestic airport? And I went, yeah. And it looked like they were on time. So I ran over there and I said, do you have any tickets remaining on that flight? We'll figure out how to transfer airports. And they said, we have 2 left. And they're first class. And I said, here you go. Get me out of here. So Shannon and I reluctantly said, we're real sorry, guys, but we're going to try to make this. So we got on the other flight, made arrangements to get transferred. We made our flight home. Amy's flight back to San Francisco was later. She barely made her flight, but she made her flight. 3 of them ended up spending another night in Buenos Aires, and they got rip-roaring drunk and had a great time. So, again, this trip was about every challenge that you could possibly imagine. It took me a solid 2 months. People would ask me how the trip was, and I'm like, I'm not ready. I do not want to talk about this trip. So I decided to do a presentation on it because, you know, misery loves company, and we've all been through, I'm sure, our own challenges. But, you know, miraculously, nobody got hurt. We had 1 injured eyeball. We had somebody with COVID that recovered, but nobody got hurt. The people were the entirety of this trip. If it weren't for the right people on this trip, it would have been much different. And our attitudes made the difference. We all took turns kind of helping us through. And so I come back to the 3 critical elements of any adventure, especially a multi-day adventure, is going to be these 3 elements. And here's just a few stats on the trip. But, you know, I talk about the level 1, 2, and 3. You really can't rate your fun right away. 2 months ago, I would have said level 3. There were parts of it that were level 3 for sure. But level 2, when you talk about those 3 levels of fun, what I have found is the best memories come from level 2 bordering on level 3. Those experiences that you're not really enjoying the moment, but those are the stories that you end up telling. So embrace the suck, surround yourself with the right people, and you'll have a great experience. But hey, thank you guys so much for listening to my story. If anybody has any questions, I know it's a little late, but if anybody has any questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. Does anybody have a couple quick questions?
What's the name of the commercial company you hired?
Yeah, Ruta 40 Moto. Run away. Yeah. So there were a couple of suggestions made when I made this post. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Was it Louise that you tried to source?
Was it Louise that tried to source?
The rental company.
No, Sean because Sean led some trips down there with Rawhide, and that's who they use. Yeah. So he had previous experience, and they were good in the past.
Right.
That was when the bikes were new?
Yeah, when they were actually a year old. Thank you guys so much.
Kandi, thank you.